Hi, everybody. And hello, hello. Carolyn has joined us.
Okay.
Um,
Here. I
joining
went
in.
away. Hi. Hey. Oh, I'm back.
You know, this is as organic as it gets. Want to make sure everybody's comfortable with spoilers. If we do talk about everyone has read the book, okay, yay. Very, very new at this, so bear with me.
This is my first time, so this is exciting.
Oh, yeah, this is fun.
Really loving this entire movement because I have been to so many like author talks and book tours because of Ernest and Hadley in the library and a bunch of other things. So I'm loving this season of life.
It is really fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, Jim.
Hello. Hey.
We're here today to talk about this book and this lady, Carolyn Ezel / Breckenridge.
I don't know, Nicole, if you heard when Dr. Noble reviewed it, but he's talking about the different billboards and so forth, and he goes, this has been done before.
There's no way it's been done your way, because your background and everything that you've done in your life just seems to show in almost the most subtle ways. I mean, your writing is, I had to write one line down that you wrote, wore the hinges off his mailbox looking for his money. I just love that line. Sometimes we're all going to the mailbox trying to find that important check or whatever.
I did love the characters who introduced themselves to me for this book are some of my very, very favorite. I loved Hattie, and then I really loved the girls. Of course, the girls are very much, especially I think Mercedes. She is so much like
Our girls.
I used to work with, and just such a little spitfire. And I just really love children who are spunky like that. And so she really had, I thought, a fun story to tell as well. So I don't know, and I like Noah. He's so quiet and peaceful and just sort of hanging out, waiting for Hattie to come around. And
I was wondering about Jubilee because I've heard you speak of her before reading the book. And the way that you spoke about her was very tenderly, almost a gentle way about her. And when I read the book, I thought, wow, Carolyn is very generous with this girl.
Jubilee, interestingly enough, I mean, Jubilee is not really cut out at that particular moment to be a real responsible mom, obviously. But what I found when I was working as a therapist was a lot of these moms were really, they really were arrested developmentally at about 7th grade. And they were sweet, sweet, sweet people, but just not prepared for adulthood in any way. And that's sort of where Jubilee is. I think she's really about 7th grade or 8th grade, hopping on the back of a motorcycle and posing as Madonna and, doing all these crazy things with the pineapple halo over her head. Eric is another of my very favorite characters. But Jubilee, I think, if you look at her in terms of how she parents her children, certainly she leaves a lot to be desired, but she's just sort of a lost soul out there. And there certainly are a lot of people like that who that they mean to do bad things, but they just get caught up in their own id and they never can come out of it. They just id away for the rest of their lives. And that's where she sort of is. So,
does she have a backstory? Does that come out later in another?
It won't actually come out. It might come out like if I write a 4th one, it doesn't come out in the 3rd one. And the 3rd one, Jubilee's not in it. She's still at the beach having a good time. Hattie is wrestling with Sadie, so she's not in it. But I do have Eric, and Eric is still creating all kinds of unusual things out of his dried fruits and vegetables, and his wife, who's always a step ahead of him, and Tony, of course, who's one of my main characters who keeps getting himself into trouble. But I don't know whether she would have a true backstory. Like, I don't think she would have a real pathetic backstory. I think Hattie did her best with her. But there is that pattern of she couldn't figure out why the young girls were named like Portia and Mercedes, but then she named her own daughter Jubilee after the Jubilee at the beach. So there's that pattern thing that's going on, which I really wanted to introduce, that all of us have these patterns. Because Avery, you really did hit it on the head. When I started Tuscaloosa Moon, the whole idea, one, I wanted to write about the children and the families I had seen and open up people's hearts and eyes a little bit more. And so they didn't just say, okay, good person, bad person, but that they could really see that there was a life and a story behind everybody in the world, and that sometimes you can coax really positive things out of people, even when their behavior at first looked fairly negative. The second thing was I really wanted to brag on Tuscaloosa and on Alabama. And at the time, this was 7 years ago when I did Tuscaloosa Moon, so there weren't that many books out that really settled on Tuscaloosa. So there were some, but not as many as today. So those are my two things. Is I'm not from the South really originally, but I wanted to say it isn't what you think it is, because it's really not. We have a beautiful state and beautiful people, and just we have a lot going on down here, I think, in the South.
And that was one of the wonderful things about reading this book, especially during this time, was I felt like I was getting to go to all these local places that I normally would go to in this story. And Kintuck almost became another character. It was always this tangible thing that they were all aspiring to.
I love championing the arts as well, all the arts. I think that's just really an important thing. This next novel is set around Green City Arts Festival. So again, we'll have that going on, and so yeah, so it's fun.
For this, but this book does mean a lot to me. I mean, I bought this book years ago when I was transitioning from being a student to living here full time, and figuring out that there's an adult community in Tuscaloosa outside of just students. And I can't remember what was going on in Government Plaza, but Carolyn and Jim, you all had a table there, and I bought Tuscaloosa Moon, and it had an Ernest&Hadley bookmark. I'll never forget. That's what first exposed me to the bookstore, because I had no idea we had a local bookstore. I love that we're talking about the character development, because Carolyn, that's something that you always pick at in other book clubs, and I love you for having that perspective and that insight that I honestly wouldn't think about. The way that the context characters in the book are so fully developed and fully formed. I mean, you don't have to live in Tuscaloosa to understand and even want to know more about Kentuck, about the neighborhood that not Alexandra Shannara lives in, about all these different aspects of the culture that builds this crazy little town. I think it developed not just the characters that are people, but just the character of the town so well. I thought that part of the book was so fully formed, to the point that I think that was the reason I just could not put it down. Even just the Greenwood Cemetery aspect of it, I thought that was so well developed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Greenwood Cemetery is such a cool place to walk around and just check out. It's just such a history lesson in of itself. So, and Jim actually, where he came from, there was a sweet little lady who used to rock in the cemetery and I guess talk to all the people at midnight. Many, she's passed away. I read also in an article years and years ago about this man who had his wife exhumed and moved because he wanted to move to a different part of the cemetery where all the rest of their friends were, so that he could sit there and visit with all of them at the same time. So it's not like an unusual thing, I don't think, for people to sometimes do this with their spouses. And so I have a question for you all. Do you think that Henry was a ghost in this book, or do you think he was because I've come to some book clubs where people have said, oh, he was a ghost, and I've had others where they say he's just sort of a crutch for her and sort of for her to survive until she could find somebody else.
Noah heard him, right?
I'm sorry, pardon?
There was a time when Noah heard him, though, wasn't there?
Noah talked to him. Noah did talk to him. He goes, what am I doing? I'm talking to you now too.
It felt like he was fading away, but giving her permission at the same time, which could have been either one, but more than likely it was her own subconscious. But I don't know.
I don't know the answer either, Avery. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, because Jake sometimes could sense him.
Jake could sense him. That's right. The answer either, because I tried to leave it really open. There's no right or wrong answer at all to this. Because people have asked me, and I don't have a clue. I don't know.
It was her heart, more than he was a spirit or a ghost. It was her heart, and even the dog and her friends, they did it to help her. To me, I didn't feel like he was a ghost. I think it was just her, like, dealing with it, and it was her heart speaking.
And it was so nice to have the pets coming into the story too.
Yes.
We love our dogs, alive or dead. Just so much a part of our Southern culture, to have our pets. And
I think the pets and the fostering echoed the tone that our community has set with Metro Animal Shelter, fostering, all the Facebook groups, and also the fostering of children. I mean, I don't know if it's because the University School of Social Work, you echoed community sentiments too. I mean, that's a big part of the local story, and I think Hattie was a great balance of all of those things.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I really wanted. There was a young woman down the street here in our neighborhood who's moved now, but she was hugely big into the rescue groups of animals, and so I really wanted to tell that story as well. I wanted to tell, because it's a huge story. I mean, people who really do transfer dogs and they're working on them, like the dog we have that you heard barking at the beginning of this. She was actually headed to Texas because there was a dachshund rescue out there. So if we had not gotten her, they already had plans to get her to the dachshund rescue in Texas. There are people that just will drive them, and so that's what Hattie and Noah are doing, of course, is driving dogs around. People who are kind to animals often are also very kind to children, and so there is that sort of echoing that it isn't always easy, because that's something that when I used to place children with foster parents, some of the children are gonna be like Mercedes. They're gonna be just wild. I mean, wild as Martyrs, and so people really have to be prepared for any number of incidents that might occur as a result. So they have to have their eyes sort of open, I think, when it comes to that. Yeah.
Oh, doggy. It's a dog.
Aww.
How it's really funny how we got the dachshund was I had called Betty Freeman, who was at that time she was really big into the West Alabama Humane Society. This was when Tuscaloosa Moon first came out, and we had a dachshund in that, of course. And so I said, I'll come out if I can come to your sale where you're selling, all kinds of different things, collars and so forth and so on, outside Pet Supply Plus, then I will donate part of my book sales to you. And she said, sure, come on down. Well, I didn't sell a book at all, but I ended up with a dachshund and a t-shirt. And so I got the dachshund after I read the story. What do y'all think about Eric? Did you like him? Or Eric was the artist, the one that did the crazy stuff?
I would not buy his stuff.
Me either.
The reason I'm asking that question is he was my original murder victim in that book.
Oh,
I just got so fond of him. I loved his little dried pineapple halos, and his dogs made out of raisins, and I was really so fond of him, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I had to rewrite the whole book. Because I got to the end of the book and I couldn't do it.
I was wondering, I was like, who is going to get it?
That's Carolyn Surprises for you.
Yeah. I liked Eric, and I can't tell you why, because I didn't like him. It's like that family member, like you love them, but you don't really like them. I can't imagine the book without him.
I agree with you. And I think Eric would be fun to go out to have a drink with and talk to, but you would never be close to him. His art was interesting, but you wouldn't want it in your house. But it was good to look. I mean, you'd enjoy looking at it. If he had a gallery, you'd like to go in. I kind of liked him.
Yeah.
Felt
Annie.
bad. She had a hard life.
Yes.
sort of
What
find out.
what was his connection to Luke? Did they have a past together at Metamorphosis at some point? Because they almost seemed like they had a.
No, not really. Carlton, I think, really, because it's a small town, like most towns, and Carlton was a big art enthusiast and bought a lot of art. Maddie was always into art, and so they get thrown together in different places. But I think Carlton really had a lot of respect for Luke. And then, of course, Luke would have been going there for a long time with his different children because Carlton was a guardian ad litem, and so that would have been their professional connection. Carlton was the guardian, and so they knew each other through that. Because usually in most cities, and I don't know how it works in Tuscaloosa, but most of the places I would go out of Tuscaloosa, there weren't that many lawyers who would be chosen by the judges to be guardians. Because you had to have a real knack with children to do it. Children had to be able to open up to you and trust you and feel comfortable with you before you could represent them. So as a result of that, only certain lawyers would be chosen to do that. So for whatever reason, people thought that maybe it was this candy that the kids kept swiping, but they, for some reason, Carlton was chosen to be the guardian ad litem for a lot of Luke's children. My experience has been, for all of us, this is true for everybody in the world, if you feel maybe a little bit vulnerable, you're going to find people who you feel real safe with. And I think maybe Luke provided that for him, because I think Carlton, for all of his blustering and everything, I think that he always felt like maybe Luke had the answers that he could never ask the questions about. And toward the end, Luke actually says to Addie, or to maybe to Shelby, he says, I just wish that Carlton had been able to open up to us, because if so, maybe, or maybe if he'd been a child and we could have talked to him then, maybe we could have helped him so he didn't feel so guilty. Because the main thing was he really had a lot of survivor guilt that he had lived and his sister had died.
I was a social worker years and years ago before I became a special educator. You do choose usually, there are only a few attorneys who are agreeable to being that guardian ad litem. And once you find one, if you're in the court system, you latch on to them. But I thought Carlton maybe felt comfortable with Luke because the children that he worked with were comfortable with Luke. And Luke had that aura about him, that you can trust me sort of aura.
Yes, I hope he does, because that's the aura I want him to project. It really is the aura.
Yes. So and what's funny is we're sitting here talking about these people as though these people are real, but these people are not real. They're in your book. And that's what's wonderful about your character development, is that we can do that.
Thank you. It's funny how characters develop, and I don't really know how they do. I really have no idea. But, I was looking back at when we were talking about Eric and his art. Well, see, I remember years and years and years ago, this lady came up to Jim and me and was really upset because her dog had just eaten her artwork from Germany, which is bread dough sculptures that had been, it was like hundreds of dollars worth of bread dough sculptures that she had brought back from Germany and put on her coffee table. And they were like shellacked, and she was really worried about the shellac in her dog. And so that's where that whole idea of making art out of food came from, because there was just some absurdity about that. That's sort of where that whole idea of Eric came from. And Eric will actually be in the next book quite prominently as well, still doing his art. He was also an artist. They were all artists in their different ways. Sean Chartine had a very mysterious background. Who knows? Very competitive toward a lot of the other artists, and very. He liked when Jubilee called him Mr. Postman. He could think of all kinds of fun games they could play around that. I wanted him to sort of be not sinister by any means, but he just had to have his own little way of doing things, I think. And he was always trying, of course, in the book to frame Tony, because Tony was just such a perfect person to frame. And of course, Tony always comes out. Tony is one of my favorite characters, because Tony always comes out not only on top, but he really is the one who solves all the murders, if you've noticed. I also wanted to, in this book, sort of bring up the idea to people of open adoption and what that meant. That sometimes one of the things I wanted to feature in this book, besides the fostering, I really wanted to feature grandparents thinking, and I can't even imagine how it would be right now for them, because right now there are not even very many supports out there for them. You know, like normally there are a lot of meetings. I guess they can Zoom, but you know, they have places where they can take the children together, and right now it must be very, very, very hard. You see a lot of that in maybe parents who've gotten hooked on drugs, and then you see this grandparent just trying to hold the family together by not letting the children go into foster care. But I think Hattie at the end really made a good decision by allowing Lexi to go off and be raised where he would still have that contact with his sisters and contact with her. And she was worried about how he would feel later when he was the one that got sort of shipped off, I guess you would say, or adopted out. She was worried about how that would feel to him, because he would certainly have questions, but also that maybe somebody else could give, Imogene could give him a better life in terms of being younger and being able to do things for him that she would not be able to do. So I wanted to sort of open up that to readers as well, that there really are a lot of open adoptions that go on out there where parents who may not be able to raise their children actually still stay very active in their children's lives once they're adopted, and how that sometimes works out best of all. There may be a child in their future anyway. I don't know. I don't know. At some point soon, Luke is going to have to decide if he is going to take over Metamorphosis, or if they're going to move to Fairhope, or if they're going to move to Oregon, or where they're going to go, and what's going to happen with them. And so,
Do you know yet?
Actually, I finished the other book, so I do know. I only have a few more chapters right in the middle. I've written both sides, and I'm coming together in the middle. And I would have it finished already, but I haven't been really rushing it, since now there's no way to have a book signing or anything at this particular moment. So, you know, it may be quite a while before big groups can get together. Were you all surprised by the ending? When did you all figure out about Annie and Carlton?
I started to wonder when she beat the two guys up in the house. Because I mean, she's got to be pretty bad to beat up two guys.
Especially Bob Tulane is a big guy. I mean,
yeah, he's wiry. Yeah, he's real wiry and strong because he cuts down trees for a living. Yeah, so he's not anything to really just mess around with. You're right. But of course, he was caught by surprise too.
It was somewhere, for me, I was starting to think something was up around the Roaches. She is awfully upset about a case that's more Carlton's business.
See, I hate to say it, I was reading for fun and I wasn't thinking too deeply about it. And it was toward the end. I mean, yeah, there were inklings like, why am I so upset about roaches? Yeah, there were all kinds of clues, but it was so exciting at the end. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't figured it out to the very end. So you're not by any means alone. And then some people start from the very beginning of the book and they're like, you know.
I agree. I think for me, I mean, like Mitzi said, I thought something was a little off when you know, she beat down two guys. This was an Agatha Christie level reveal to me.
Oh, yeah. I feel bad for Carlton, though.
One of those books, How to Fold Money into All Kinds of Different Shapes. And I started thinking how fun it would be for Ben Franklin to be staring at the jury and like looking at women in their odd places. Carlton didn't dare do that very often, although he sometimes like would ogle Rainey, his secretary, and toyed with wanting to marry her. Still, there was this whole thing of Annie and how she'd fit into that relationship, and and Imogene, and how, you know, for a while he thought, well, I could live with Imogene and eat donuts, but then marry Rainey in the end. And I think Rainey really did serve almost a maternal role with him. She was a minor character, but she somehow did serve.
I liked Rainey a lot. I felt a little sad for her. She understood him. I mean, I felt like if anyone, he could have told her about it, and it would have been okay.
I think she felt that way too. Her, that would be the big question she'd have as the years went by, was why he didn't trust her enough, because I think that probably was really going to be hard for her, I suspect.
Where is she going to go? Do you have any idea? Is she featured at all in your next book? Is she there?
Yeah, no, I think she went back to Florida.
Because she's a true caregiver and she was really good.
I say thank you, but really they're not my characters. I don't know where they go. I do pick up pieces of just oddities, like, you know, the German red sculptures and stuff, and they do pop into the characters, but the characters themselves, they they make themselves, they come to me. This third book is more, I mean, it's like there are all these really hot romances going on all over the place. With this third one, there's a really lecherous English professor. How the whole community is like some sort of Shakespeare comedy or something, with all these characters in and out of each other's lives in strange and odd ways, but hopefully the characters will stand out as much. And Esme, of course, is her father's not going to give in, and he's going to keep his snakes. So what's going to happen to her? I mean, she's got to have somewhere to live.
So, Carolyn, can you walk us through the books in the series, including what you've been working on recently?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first one, of course, was Tuscaloosa Moon. That was the first one. The two children who are featured are Andrew. He's really the main character, and his brother, Joey. And unfortunately, I had named Tony's cousin a different name up in Chicago, but then one of our best friends' grandsons was named that name. And since Tony's cousin was not a real good guy, I renamed the cousin Joseph before I realized that probably I shouldn't have a Joey and a Joseph. So anyway, there's Joey and Andrew and in the first book. And their main thing is they have a mom who is constantly getting involved with other men, including like their coach and anybody really that they have in their life. She's sitting on the men, and she has her own reasons for doing that and her own issues. And Andrew is always trying to figure out who his father is in that book. So that's one of the mysteries that the reader has to solve, as well as some of the other mysteries that are going on in the book. The biggest mystery being, and you find this out very early on, that the mother is going to be murdered. Now I have friends who say, murder her already, or I'm going to do it myself, because the murder doesn't take place till almost the end, and by that time you're just really so ready for the murder to happen, you don't know what to do. But way toward the end, the murder actually happens, but you know on like the first or second page she's going to die. That you told that in the beginning. So that's the first one. And again, the idea that Tony is in that one as well, Tony and his grandmother, Rebecca. And Rebecca is a really typical grandma struggling to make her grandson behave, and he's just always walking that fine line. So that's a mystery too, who killed her. And then there's the other mystery of there's another woman in there who loses her life, and so it's a triple mystery sort of. You've got to figure out all three of those. Yeah. And then in the second one, as you know, you still have Addie and you have Luke, and they're in there, and Tony comes forward, Rebecca comes forward, some of the other characters come forward, Esme comes forward, and then Esme, because Esme's in the first book too, and she always has a lot of sense. She was very attached to her grandmother, Joanna Sue, and she's always used to say to her, don't worry, child, you know, everything's gonna be all right, don't fret, everything's gonna be all right. Then in the third book, Esme, it's Tuscaloosa Trolley, unless they stop me, I still haven't any reason why I can't call it that. So I'm going to call it Tuscaloosa Trolley. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the action does take place on the trolley, but nothing negative. Just a lot of the talking back and forth takes place on the trolley. You have some new characters, housekeeper, who's working in one of the motels downtown called the Goalpost Inn. It has, of course, cream colored paper with goalposts on all the envelopes and stuff, crimson goalposts and footballs and stuff. Then you have this whole other set of mysteries, which also will hopefully perplex everyone. I don't want to go too far into that without giving you some spoilers, but in that one we do also have Addie and RJ trying to solve the mystery, and Addie and Luke trying to solve the mysteries as well, because of course Luke is always getting involved because of his kids. And Benjamin is in the third one just a tiny bit, but not very much. Andrew comes back. Andrew's in the third one very strongly, and he's doing real well. I will let you know that.
Yay.
And his girlfriend Bethy, they're still together. They've been together for years and years. And this time, one of the characters we have is a very nefarious jeweler. So we have a lecherous English professor and a nefarious jeweler.
How old is Andrew in this book?
The third book, he's going to be about 20. So he's on his own, and he's in college, and Esme is just about ready. I think she's 16, almost 17, so she's about ready go on to some sort of independent living or something. And then the question is really what happens with Luke and Addie, who never really play a huge part in the books. Actually, if you've noticed, it's funny, I call them Addie Bramson mysteries, but really she doesn't play. She played a little bit of a bigger picture, I think, in Tuscaloosa Moon than she did even in Boneyard, because I develop my mysteries and then she comes in to solve them. But by that time, we're almost at the end of the book. So she doesn't have as much to do in that book as she did maybe in the first one, where she really did. She was involved in the beginning.
She and Luke still figure prominently as far as characters.
I hope that they do, because that's, and they pop in and out all the time, and their little silly romances, like, you know, they get that rubber kayak and they're in the middle, Luke in the middle of the floor. Luke is always, he's so goofy at home, isn't he, really? I'm like,
He really is.
Pretty normal at work, but
I hope she doesn't have troubles with this English professor. That would be terrible.
Yeah, this English professor, you got to watch him now.
Yeah.
So, Carolyn, I wanted to ask, do you have a favorite Kentuck artist?
I love all of the art at Kentuck, and I love all of the art that you find at the Kentuck store. You know, I believe that we have such a neat range of visual artists in this city, and I try to stay away from the art galleries now, because I can't go and not find something that I obsess about till I buy it. And more. I really trying to downsize.
Jim back there.
That's a Kentuck piece behind us, that one there. There's also the Dinah Washington Center, where they have art all the time, and they're quilters, and we also have incredible jewelers and really
and potters too.
And potters, oh yes, oh yeah, I love them all. I mean, they're really good. I don't think you can ever go to an art show and not find at least one or two. You know, I mean, like, if, for example, with Hattie, I mean, we've all met women who are that strong, right? Come one step further and I'm going to shoot. And they're really soft and sweet inside. They're just real tough on the outside. And I really am attracted to people who are so strong and yet still really tender inside. I really love that character. When I sit down at the beginning, I sort of know who may die, but not always, given that sometimes I've rewritten a whole book because of that. So I think the characters just sort of come from somewhere, and I don't know where they come from, but wherever they come from, it's really fun because I'm getting to know them at the same time. And I think I've said before, maybe I said with Tuscaloosa Moon, I might have this idea that Esme is going to go live with so-and-so, but Esme will say, I don't like that person. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go live here. And I go, oh, okay. And so a lot of the time it's my characters who really tell me where they're going. And I ride herd over the group of them. It's like, no, that is just that's beyond literary bounds. You really can't go there, or no, you can't do this. And somehow we have to make all these other facts fit in there. So I'll talk to my characters that way, but I don't really create them. They create themselves.
When you are writing narrative, do you envision the conversations going on?
If I'm really doing well, I'll actually fall asleep at my computer and my nose will start hitting the M or the X. It'll go like M. Because what happens is you get almost into like a dream state. And sometimes it makes no sense at all. I'll wake up and it'll be like, and they went to the zoo and had barbecue for dinner, and it'll be like, what? You know, this doesn't make any sense at all. But then other times it all works well. So I get into like this almost self-hypnotic state. It's not intentional, but somewhere or another, I just get to this really, really relaxed state. And that's when I do my best work. Before my nose starts hitting the M on the computer. When I'm writing narrative, I have an idea of where it's going to go, because I'll work on that during the day of gardening. I'll say, okay, so what's this chapter going to, how's it going to advance the book? What's it going to do? But then how it's done and whether or not that's the way it turns out is totally different from maybe the original way I intended it to be. Very rarely do I win arguments against my characters. They usually tell me how they want it to be. It's crazy. It's a beautiful process for all of us who create. I think we all create differently. We all have different ways of doing it. But it's sort of like, in a way, sitting above and watching it from below. It's like watching a play from above. I don't really think, okay, what's he supposed to say now? What's he going to say now? I hear it and I just type it. Read is what I do. What's sort of slowed me down right now, but it has been a lovely thing is I've had 3 manuscripts come in to read, 2 to write blurbs on the back of, and then another one that came in that's about to be put out. I'll have maybe 2 books. I usually read 1 book at a time, but even sometimes I'll read 2 at a time. So I'll read at night when I finish writing, and I usually read way outside my comfort zone. I read anything that people will put in front of me, and they'll hand me something and I'll go, oh, I really don't. But actually, I think Stephen King was the one who said most of us, if you really want to write, you've got to read twice as much as you write, and you've also got to read way outside your comfort zone. I think it's really helpful to do that because you just find all sorts of things and techniques that you would never think of, and ways that people present characters you would never think of. So it's been, I mean, I've read all kinds, and some of the things, sort of like Green Eggs and Ham, like I would have never thought that I loved fantasy and horror, but I love Patricia's books so much, and her books are definitely very, very fantasy and all about Japanese culture and history, and there's horror in them, and I really do enjoy them a lot. So I would have not thought I would enjoy them, but Patricia Correll's books to me are just so well written, and I love them.
How many hours do you actually write?
Depends on the day. Like, I never write for more than 2 or 3 hours. I don't like to do it like daytime. Usually I'm outside in the garden during the day, and if I'm not falling asleep at the computer at night, then I'll try to write for 2 or 3 hours. But normally I write from about dinner time till about 9 or 8 or 9 at night, and then I read until I go to bed after that.
And I was going to say, with Jim, I want to hear your answer too, but I don't want you to go into too much detail because next month is your month.
Yay! Debris Cloud.
Debris Cloud is our next pick.
Yay.
And I even got the book today and left the book today at the office.
Not only does he have one, but he has it right here. He was ready.
Jim just happens to have a copy.
Say just a couple of things about how I write. I'm very different from her. I like to write early in the morning, say at 6:30 or 7, because I'm pretty much an early riser. Sometimes I won't start writing until after 11 o'clock at night. Something comes into my head. I do read a lot. I used to read a lot of Stephen King, a lot of Tony Hellerman. I read all the Tony Hellerman. I'm a huge fan of Patrick O'Brien. I like Charles Finch, and I do watch a fair number of movies, but I typically don't watch American movies. I enjoy watching a lot of foreign movies, and I like a lot of shorts. There are a lot of short science fiction movies right now, 20 and 30 minutes. They're on YouTube. But I'm looking forward to talking about Debris Cloud next month. Be sure to read it. If you have a copy, read it.
I guess the only other thing I would say, Nicole, about my process is that I really try in every book, even murder mysteries, I really want the reader to be left with hope. And so there's always, at the end, I feel like there's always I don't want to say a happy ending, because obviously you have Carlton and Sean laying there, or, you know, you have Priscilla laying there, but at the same time, there is life goes on, and there's a lot of hope for the people who maybe have struggled in the book for various and sundry reasons. And I think that was true also in Kaleidoscope Jane. My big question will be, and y'all, I may have asked this question before, but after I finish Tuscaloosa Trolley, one of the suggestions I've had is to take Andrew and Bethy, and they'll be newlyweds, and spin a book, a novella just off of them, or take Hattie or take Jubilee and spin a little novella off of her, and not have full novels necessarily, but just sort of take the characters and make little books about different ones of them that people are curious about, that may or may not show back up in the future. I don't know, like some authors have done that, like had Christmas stories where everybody comes in for Christmas, you know, but I don't know. What do y'all think? I mean, is that a good idea, a bad idea?
I like it. I wanted to know more about Jubilee and what happened to her at a pivotal point in her development. So, I mean, I'm curious. I am curious to know more about these people.
She might have been born just with a mental illness, you know. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
With her, that Sadie is beginning to sort of mirror that, because Sadie has some of those same characteristics. Obviously, she's wild as a buck, and and it may where Portia is sort of taking care of everybody and very sensitive, and Sadie is just out there willing to fling herself off the highest bridge, and maybe somebody will catch her and maybe somebody won't. And that's sort of the same way that Jubilee is. She's just out there.
I think you have a lot of food for thought for doing that, because you have a lot of minor characters. I think of them as minor, like Jubilee and other people. I would hate to see Addie and Luke go by the wayside. And I've read a lot of series with female, not police investigators. I think she was a medical examiner, but she solved mystery. I'd like to see more with Luke and Addie, as there are always more mysteries. There are always more children coming through metamorphosis. Even if they move to wherever, he's not going to give up helping kids.
No, he's not.
And even if he doesn't take over, and in fact, it might be kind of boring for him to take over, because then he'll be an administrator. Blech. I do love the stories in Tuscaloosa. That's one of the draws. I'd hate to see them go by the wayside.
And that's a really important thing, because this is really funny too. I was at a book club and somebody said, "Oh my God, my very favorite character is Rebecca." That's Coney's grandmother. I thought, because actually she was going to die.
She could die.
She was going to die of a heart attack. I'm like, okay, she can't die.
die.
After she said that, I thought, okay, that's your reprieve. So Rebecca lives. But in fact, it's so funny, because Dr. Noble, when he called me before he reviewed this book, Boneyard, he said, "You even put Cottondale in here." And I said, "I did." And the reason was because I was at Barnes & Noble and somebody said, "Cottondale's not in this book. I want Cottondale in the next book." And I said, "Okay." Because I really do like to listen to my readers. I mean, that's important. So Rebecca has somebody at another book club to be thankful for, because it saved her life, actually.
Luke and Addie, but I think, Carolyn, honestly, as long as you're answering everyone's biggest question, what's their story? I think the general consensus is like, we love knowing more. So you can expand on that in so many different ways and still do well. Because I've gotten so mad at so many different production offices for just doing too many sequels and just doing too much. But when it comes to books like this, I always there's no such thing as enough context. I just want to know everyone's story.
Oh, thank you. This particular book, I just felt real fortunate, because the people who introduced themselves to me and said they wanted to be in it were all, they all had such life to them, and they were just all a lot of fun to get to know, and I really enjoyed that. I really did. So, because for me, it really is like that. It's, as I said, it's just me sitting in a room and them all sort of coming in and telling me who they are.
What I thought was neat is that this second book was very different from the first book, and I like that in a series, because after a while they all start sounding alike. You may as well not read the next book, because it's just like the last book. So I liked the fact that your book was totally different than the first book.
Thank you for noticing that. That was a really big deal to me, because I had the exact same problem. I don't like to do the same thing the same way twice. And I feel the same way about series. If the series gets too predictable, or the voice stays too much the same, and the pace stay the same, I really get bored quickly. And so I went into the second book with the full intention of making it a completely different experience. And the third one, it has a lot more. There's so many love triangles in it, you could build a pyramid. Okay. But I did it that way because the third one has its own sort of personality. And for me, there's a challenge in that. But the other part of it is also, I don't want my readers to get bored. So I'm glad you noticed, because that was real important to me. That was
If you ever have any questions, you have my email address, you have my phone number, please call me. I miss you all so, so much. I will also put together another one of those things to vote for books, but y'all keep making your suggestions over the course of the month so I know what to put on there. Let's reconvene next month. It was so good to see y'all, and thank you again, Carolyn, for speaking with us tonight. Yay, thank you so much.
Love you.
Anywhere, anyway.
It's good.
Right, no tickets, no driving, no speeding.
That's right.
Maybe that's one of the good things about all of this.
All right, you guys, I want everyone to have a good evening and happy reading, okay?